Well, welcome to the True Man Podcast. This is an invitation to radical reconstruction of a man's masculine heart and soul in a place of safe community where we dare to ask questions deep seated inside a man and explore ways to help you become a better man, a better son, a better dad, and a better spouse. Well, welcome back to the True Man Podcast. So great to have you here. We are, of course, in the middle of a hot summer. So it makes sense today that we're going to talk about a little baseball and life. And boy, I think you're going to enjoy this episode. I sure enjoyed putting it together, and it really has everything to do with the trip that I took back home to Iowa. Yes, home for me is Iowa, or as we're going to reference today, also known as heaven. But before I get into that, let's talk real quick about the power of asking for help, the American Family Renaissance Summit. This is a summit that is going to be released on September 14th, and it is a free summit that you can go out to my website, and you will be able to sign up. And on September 14th, you're going to be able to hear from 8 great speakers, including myself. Those speakers are Scott Schilling, Jim Britt, Bob Tiede, Bob Bodine, Tom Ziegler, Vince Miller, and hang with me to the end of the podcast, because I'm going to talk about one of the great guests that we're having on. This is something that I'm going to do over the next few weeks. We're going to talk about Chris Widener. What a great guy. So hang on to the end of the podcast. I'm going to tell you all about him, but you can read every one of our speakers' bios is out there on the AmericanFamilyRenaissance.org website in the summit area. You can also sign up for this summit. And you are just going to be amazed at the tremendous wisdom that these gentlemen bring to the table. So I'm excited to be rolling this out over the next few weeks. And of course, you can go out to AmericanFamilyRenaissance.org. We've got the blogs are out there. The podcast is out there, of course. So whatever platform you're listening to, you can connect to it on truemanpodcast.com, which is on the website. And boy, just so much great information that we're beginning to add to that site. Just so many things to be excited about. But let's dive into the podcast today, because I want to talk to you about Field of Dreams. So if you've seen the movie, you've heard this line: if you build it, he will come. Now, this is also a very misunderstood line and often quoted as if you build it, they will come. And yes, that does happen. They do come, not to give away the end of the movie, but the most compelling line in the movie Field of Dreams is, if you build it, he will come. Now, that's 6 words whispered to a broke, exhausted Iowa farmer standing alone in a cornfield. No explanation, no 5-year plan, no confirmation that he wasn't losing his mind, right? And Ray Kinsella built it anyway. Of course, in the movie, Ray Kinsella is played by Kevin Costner. Now, I want to talk to you today about whispers, about what happens when God speaks to a man in a voice quiet enough that the rest of the world will never hear it, but loud enough that he can't unhear it either. And I want to talk to you about something that's been sitting with me since I stood on that actual field, that actual movie set, essentially just a few short days ago. And describe to you how a man in 2026 with a phone buzzing in his pocket and a world that has its foot on the gas pedal of life actually has the opportunity to slow down enough to hear anything at all. But I did. So let's get into it on the True Man Podcast. Now, if you've listened to me for any length of time, you know I grew up in central Iowa. And of course, baseball there is a summertime rite of passage. So when Field of Dreams came out in 1989, just a year after I graduated from high school, it didn't land like just another baseball movie for me. It landed like something closer to home. So here's the surface story, quick, for anybody who hasn't seen the movie for a while. So again, Ray Kinsella is the character played by Kevin Costner in the movie. He is a farmer, an Iowa farmer, haunted by a broken relationship with his late father, and by the fear that he'll grow old, having never chased the one thing that actually mattered to him. Now, a voice tells him to build a baseball field in his cornfield. So he does. And Shoeless Joe Jackson and a handful of other ghosts of the game show up to play. And that voice sends Ray on a cross country chase after a reclusive author and an old ball player who never got his shot in the big leagues. Meanwhile, the bank is closing in on the farm the whole time, putting a lot of pressure on Ray in the movie. And then, right in the end, Ray understands what it was actually all about, everything that he was doing. It was never about baseball. It was about healing old wounds, restoring lost dreams, and second chances. And one final player takes off his catcher's mask, and Ray recognizes his father as a young man. And father and son get to have a catch beneath the evening sky. And then the cars, if you remember the movie, if you've seen it, start streaming in. Because if a man has the courage to build it, people and healing will come. Now, I've said this before, and I'll say it again on the podcast because I believe it's the whole point of the movie. Underneath the baseball, this is a story about a man learning to hear a whisper and having the courage to obey it before he understood it. Ever happened to you? You see, that's why I want to unpack what I want to unpack today, because I don't think Ray's story is unique to Ray. I think it's a pattern, one that God still uses with men right now, including me, including probably you, right? So here's something that I haven't talked much about publicly, really, but I want to bring it into this episode because I do think it matters. Almost every time I go back to Iowa, something happens to me. I don't have a better word for it than I get a download. It's an audible. It's not dramatic, but it's unmistakable. And honestly, it usually feels like a great reward when I receive it. Like God gave me something specific for me on that soil, in that quiet, away from everything that normally competes for my attention. So on this last trip, standing on the actual field of dreams, that black dirt on top of that Kentucky bluegrass, here's what I heard. Slow down, rest, pause. Simple enough. Now, I could have guessed that one without going on a trip to Iowa, but then it kept going. And this is the part that really stopped me. But do it in movement, in obedience, and in discipline. Now, on the surface, that sounds like a contradiction, but how do you rest and move at the same time? How do you slow down through discipline when discipline is usually the thing that keeps us moving fast? So I sat with that tension for a few days. It was a 3-hour drive between Dyersville, Iowa, and my hometown, so I had plenty of time to think, plenty of window time, and here's where I landed. And I think this is the real meat of this episode. Ray didn't rest by doing nothing in the movie. Ray rested, really, truly found peace for the first time in years by obeying a voice that told him to move. He built something. He drove across the country. He labored under a deadline with the bank breathing down his neck. And from the outside, none of that looks like rest. But internally, for the first time in the whole movie, Ray wasn't striving for something. He wasn't white-knuckling his way through life, the life that he'd built on performance and fear. He was simply doing the next thing the voice told him to do. One obedient step at a time, trusting the outcome to somebody other than himself. And of course, if you've seen the movie, everybody thinks he's nuts, right? Like, what's going on here? But you see, that's the kind of rest that Scripture's actually talking about in the Bible. Not laziness, not the absence of effort, a settled trust underneath the effort. In Isaiah chapter 30, verse 15 says it very plainly, in quietness and trust is your strength. Quietness and trust, not quietness and stillness. You can be in motion and still be at rest. If the motion is obedience and the striving has stopped. You see, that's the contradiction I heard on that field. And I think it's exactly the contradiction in a rather congruent way that a lot of us are missing. It's a little confusing, right? Here's the problem most of us are actually up against. You see, the world is not slowing down to make room for you to hear a whisper. If anything, it's speeding up. All the notifications, the deadlines, a culture that measures a man's worth by his output, his hustle, his ability to stay one step ahead of everybody else in the room. We wear exhaustion like a badge now. Somebody asks how you're doing, and the honest answer for most men is busy. I know I've told you before, I try to avoid that word because I think it's become a hiding place. Busy sounds productive, busy sounds respectable, but a lot of the time, busy is just a noise loud enough that a man never has to sit still long enough to hear what God's actually trying to tell him. And here's the danger in that, really. Elijah in the Bible didn't hear God in the windstorm, the earthquake, or the fire. In 1 Kings chapter 19 tells us that God's voice showed up in a whisper. Some translations call it a still small voice after all that noise had passed. Now, if Elijah had stayed in the windstorm looking for God, he'd have missed him entirely. I think a lot of us are standing in our own windstorm right now. Our inboxes, our schedules, our scroll, we are looking for God in all the noise of life. And when he's waiting for us in the quiet, that's where he's waiting for us. He's waiting for us in that quiet on the other side of it. You see, Psalm 46, chapter 10 puts it even more directly. Be still and know I am God. Not hustle harder and know that I'm God. Not grind until you collapse and know that I'm God. He says, be still. That's a command. It's not a suggestion. And for most men, I know it's the hardest command in the whole Bible to actually obey. So let's get practical here, because I don't want to leave you today with a nice idea that there's no way to live all this out. Here's what I've learned. Some of it on the field, some of it over years of chasing this same tension in my own life, and a lot of conversations with other guys. But here's how I believe a man actually creates room to hear God's whisper in a world that refuses to lower its volume. Go somewhere that the noise can't follow you. How about that one? So for me, I got to take a trip back to Iowa. For you, it might be a lake, a garage, a early morning porch before the house wakes up. You know, Ray had to be alone in that cornfield before he ever heard the voice. You will not out hustle your way into hearing God. You have to physically remove yourself from the windstorm long enough for the whisper to have a chance. Here's the second one. Expect the instructions to sound smaller than the moment. You see, God didn't tell Ray, save your marriage, restore baseball's legacy in America, and heal a national wound around fatherhood. No, he told him to build a baseball field in the middle of a cornfield. One step, that's how it usually works. The whispers rarely come with the whole plan attached. Usually just the next thing. So if you're waiting for total clarity before you'll move, you may be waiting past the point God intended you to already be walking. Obey before you understand. Now, this is a hard one, and I get it. Ray built the field before he had any idea what it was for. He kept driving across the country before he understood why. Most of us want the meaning first and the obedience second. God typically works the other way around. The meaning shows up somewhere in the obedience, not before it. That's certainly been my experience. Let discipline be the vehicle for rest, not the enemy of it. Now, remember the contradiction: slow down, rest, pause, but be in movement, obedience, and discipline. A consistent morning routine, a Sabbath you actually protect, a habit of getting quiet at the same time every day. These aren't burdens working against rest. They're the discipline that makes rest possible in a life that would otherwise never stop moving long enough to offer it to you. Finally, protect the field once it's built. See, Ray didn't just build the field once and move on. He kept showing up to it. He kept tending it. He kept returning to the place where the voice first spoke. Whatever your field is, a physical place, a morning practice, a weekly rhythm, the whisper doesn't just show up once and never again. It shows up in the place you keep returning to. So I want to bring this back to where the movie ends, because I think it's the whole reason this story has stuck with so many men, including myself, for almost 40 years. You see, Ray doesn't get the reward until after the obedience. He doesn't get the catch with his father at the beginning of the movie. He gets it in the very end. After he's built, after he's driven across the country, after he's nearly lost the farm, after he's trusted a voice nobody else could hear all the way to the edge of everything he had. The reconciliation is the last scene, not the first. Now, guys, that's not an accident. That's how it almost always works with God. The whisper leads to obedience. Obedience leads to movement, and somewhere down the road, not always where you expect it, of course, the healing shows up. You know, I've stood in rooms, been in rooms where the catch scene plays and watch grown men go completely silent because it's telling the truth about what they're still carrying. And if that's you, I want you to hear this clearly. The whisper you've been ignoring because it doesn't make sense yet, the field you haven't built because you can't see the whole plan, the slowing down you keep putting off because the world won't stop demanding your speed, none of that disqualifies you from the ending Ray got. It just means you haven't finished the obedience yet. So here's what I want to leave you with today. This week, I want you to find your version of that cornfield, somewhere quiet enough that the whisper actually has a chance against all the noise we're fighting against. And when you get there, don't go looking for a 5-year plan. Go looking for the next right step, the one instruction small enough to actually obey today. Slow down, rest, pause. But do it in movement, in obedience, and in discipline. You see, that's not a contradiction. That's the whole pattern God's been using with men since long before a farmer in Iowa ever heard the voice in his cornfield. And if you build it, the quiet, the obedience, the discipline actually stop and listen. I believe healing has a way of finding its way to that field. It found its way to Ray's, and I believe it can find its way to yours. How about that? So before I go this, man, that was fun to talk about. I got to tell you, it was fun. And yes, I got to have a catch with Dad out there on Field of Dreams. Dad, hope you're enjoying this podcast this week. It was a lot of fun to go out and have that catch with you. But before I go this week, I want to take a couple of minutes to tell you about one of the men joining us on the American Family Renaissance that was being released on September 14th, Chris Widener. So who is Chris? Chris is a member of the Motivational Speakers Hall of Fame, named as one of Inc. magazine's top 100 leadership speakers, and he has been ranked among the top 50 speakers in the world. He's delivered speeches for some of the biggest names in the American business: GE, AT&T, Microsoft, Harvard Business School, and he has spoken from stages on nearly every continent. He has written over 20 books that have sold millions of copies and has been translated into dozens of languages. And here's the detail I love most. Chris was personally mentored by Jim Rohn, Rohn's very last protege. In fact, someone Rohn himself called the leader of the next generation of leadership and personal development experts. So Chris co-authored Rohn's final book, 12 Pillars, and spent the last 7 years of Rohn's life working alongside him. On top of that, Zig Ziglar personally chose Chris to co-host his TV show, True Performance. And Chris is one of only 2 authors Ziglar ever endorsed in fiction for the book, The Angel Inside. Now, that is a resume that speaks for itself, but that's not really why we asked him to be a part of all this. Why did I want Chris to join us? Well, Chris isn't just a speaker who talks about success. He spent decades studying what actually makes a man's influence trustworthy instead of hollow. Now, that's the thread that I want every man at this summit to walk away with. Real influence is a technique. It's built on character. And Chris carries forward a legacy from 2 men, as you heard me mention, in Rohn and Ziglar, who spent their careers pointing people toward personal responsibility, integrity, steady growth. And that's exactly the lineage that we want to represent at this summit, standing alongside God, family, and country, that message that we're building here at the American Family Renaissance. And Chris is known for being a real down-to-earth with his audience, not a polished stage act. And you're going to see this, and you'll love him right out of the gate. He's a real straight shooter that tells the truth, even when it isn't flattering. And that's the same tone I want everyone who turns into the summit to experience. Not another motivational high, but something that actually lands and sticks. So on September 14th, when Chris gets to step up for his part on the American Family Renaissance Summit, I want you to listen for that thread. A man who learned directly from 2 of the most respected voices in personal development in the last century, now using that same wisdom to point men toward influence that's actually built on trust, not performance. So if you haven't signed up for the summit yet, my goodness, what are you waiting for? This is one more reason to make sure you're there. This is it. So we want you to get out to the website. Again, I'm going to include a link on the True Man podcast notes here, but get out there, sign up for this. Chris is just one of many 8 of us that are going to be included on this summit. And you can tell this guy has the lineage, has the chops to pass wisdom on to you. Now, with that, we're going to end this great podcast today. Hey, thank you so much for joining me on the True Man podcast. If you enjoyed it, please pass this podcast on to a friend and give me a great review on your favorite podcast channel. With that, I want to encourage you, don't just make it a mediocre day. Go out and have your best day ever. God bless you, and thank you for listening.